Hello everyone and welcome to our series on reading comprehension. A very frequently encountered question in reading comprehensions is asking about the main idea or the central idea of the passage. So here we are going to discuss a technique which works in most cases when you're trying to find out the central idea or the main idea of a passage. Okay, this technique is called topic, scope, purpose or TSP. So in this, what we do is whenever we are given a passage, we first think of what the topic is. A topic means the broad subject that the passage deals with. Then we come to the scope. See, the broad subject needs to be narrowed down somewhat. So that is the specific aspect of the topic. Specific aspect of the topic that the author is dealing with. Then we come on to the purpose. The purpose is basically why did the author write this article. So what is the author's contribution to this body of knowledge? So what this basically means is these things could be basically traditional knowledge or something that has been prevalent in books or is common knowledge or anything, but this is what the author is contributing. This is the contribution of the author to that particular topic or the scope. So we'll take some examples to see how this works. Okay, you can pause this video and first read this passage. In this, if you see, once I'm assuming you've read the passage, the topic in this case is malnutrition. Okay, so this passage is basically the broad subject matter is malnutrition. That should be very clear. Now, as far as the scope is concerned, so about malnutrition, I can write about a lot of things. I can write about the effect of malnutrition. I can write about why malnutrition is happening, or I can write about what happens to the children who are malnourished. So there could be various things which could be dealt with under malnutrition. Those are the scopes. In this particular passage, as you can see, if you would have read, you will see that this happens despite this. So, or you can say it is attributed to poverty. So we are basically discussing about the causes of malnutrition. So this is what we are limiting the very broad topic of malnutrition to causes of malnutrition. Now after that, we come to the purpose. The purpose, as I said, is why did the author write it, or what is the author's contribution to this particular topic or the scope. So the author here says that it is crucial to increase awareness, or if you can say that it is basically the lack of awareness regarding the child's food needs that is leading to malnutrition. So the author's purpose or the central idea or the main idea of this passage is that we need to increase awareness, or it could be any other thing worded differently but meaning the same. That is, it could say that the major cause of malnutrition is that there is lack of awareness. So this basically is the purpose of this particular passage or the main idea of this particular passage. So if you see, this is the topic. Topic is very, very broad. Within the topic, you have the scope. Now one particular topic can have many scopes. So you can have this scope, you can have another scope here, you can have another scope. So there is a particular scope which the author has chosen. Within that is the purpose or the central idea. This is the author's contribution to this body of knowledge. So this is how this works. So now let's take another example. Again, you please pause this video and read this passage. So in this particular case is competition law, right? So right in the beginning, you can see that we're talking about the need for competition law becomes more evident, etc. So we're talking about competition law. The scope is basically competition law under a regime of liberalized FDI. I'm sorry for my writing, it's really, really bad, which I think probably cost me a lot in my exams also. So the scope is competition law in liberalized FDI. So because we're not talking about competition law in general, we're not talking about competition law in India without talking about FDI. We've limited the competition law to the case where we have liberalized FDI. So becomes more evident when foreign direct investment is liberalized. Then we finally talk about the purpose. In this case, you should have figured it out yourself. The purpose of this is that we should have a strong competition law in FDI regimes to encourage FDI and also to mitigate its non-competitive effects. I've given you a very long purpose, but basically in very short, it would mean that we should have a strong competition law in liberalized FDI regimes. That is the basic purpose of the author. So let us assume that the author of this particular passage is called to a TV talk show. So what is the author? And he is called there to propagate whatever his theory is. What do you think he will talk about? He is going to basically say in the talk show that we should have a strong competition law in liberalized FDI regimes, and maybe a counter author or somebody else will be arguing against it. So the purpose is that, you know, the one way of thinking about it is that if this author were to be invited to a talk show, what would he be talking about? He is not going to be talking about competition law in general. He is not going to be talking about competition law generally about in liberalized FDI. He is going to be making a thesis. He is going to be arguing for something. That argument is this in this particular case. In some cases, you might come across some passages which do not have a very argumentative tone. It is very informative in general. In those cases, in fact, you will hardly ever be, called to tell what the main idea or the central idea of the passage is. In those cases, you will be asked factual type of questions more often. So in those cases, it will be more important for you to just read the passage very carefully and answer the factual questions without making any silly mistake or stupid mistake.